I'm guessing every girl has a Pinterest board called Parisian Dream. I had one too. It was filled with pictures of picnics by the Eiffel Tower, elegant Parisians in red lipstick, breakfasts with fresh croissants, and views of cozy attic apartments. I flew to France convinced I was stepping into a real-life romantic movie. But the Paris that greeted me was nothing like the pictures on Pinterest. It was noisy, dirty, sometimes rude, and completely indifferent to my dreams. And you know what? That's exactly why I fell in love with it. This is the story of how my perfect image of Paris was shattered, and why it was the best thing that could have happened.
We're collecting donations for the Imaginary Foundation, which supports humanitarian.
The adventure began at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Chaos, crowds, signs in French. I immediately felt small and lost. My first quest was to buy a ticket for the RER train to the city center. I tried to explain myself to the cashier in my high school French, but she looked at me with such icy indifference that I felt like a character in a silent comedy. And then I was in the Paris metro. Forget the charming scenes from the movie Amélie. The reality is the smell of dampness, stuffy air, overcrowded cars, and musicians playing so loud it makes your ears ring. This was my first taste of Paris syndrome, the acute disappointment from the gap between high expectations and reality. I stood in the middle of this buzzing hive thinking, and this is the city of love? And so, after the metro quest, the next boss awaited me, my apartment. I had rented a charming studio on Airbnb. In the photos, it looked perfect. In reality, I was met with a tiny, ancient elevator that barely fit one person in a suitcase, which of course was broken. I had to drag my 50-pound suitcase up 6 flights of a narrow, winding staircase. When I finally opened the door, out of breath and angry, I saw a room the size of my closet back in America. And that wasn't all. To get hot water, I had to press some mysterious timer button. The windows faced an inner courtyard where I could observe my neighbors' daily lives in detail. This was not the cozy nest with a rooftop view I had dreamed of. This was lesson number 2. The romance of Paris in photos often hides a harsh reality. For the first few days, I was desperately trying to find that postcard Paris. I went to a cafe and ordered a coffee. They brought me a tiny cup of bitter espresso. I wanted to take a leisurely stroll through the Louvre, but I ended up in a gigantic queue, and then in a crowd that carried me towards the Mona Lisa, which I could barely see through hundreds of smartphones. But Paris tested my resilience, not just with daily challenges. It tested my naivety. I went up to the Sacré-Cœur Basilica in Montmartre to enjoy the view. Before I could even take a few steps, a group of guys surrounded me. One of them skillfully tied a friendship bracelet made of string around my finger, and then they demanded 20 euros for it. I was confused and scared. I felt so stupid. It was humiliating, and in that moment, I was ready to buy a ticket for the next flight home. The city felt hostile. Everything changed in a single moment. I walked into a small bakery, and instead of immediately pointing at a croissant and saying, "This one," I gathered all my courage and said, "Bonjour, madame." The shopkeeper, who had looked stern until then, looked up, smiled, and replied, "Bonjour." It was a revelation. Parisians aren't rude. They simply value politeness and respect for their culture. A simple bonjour, s'il vous plaît, merci, opened all the doors. Waiters started recommending the best dishes, and passers-by would carefully explain the directions. I realized that Paris isn't a movie set for tourists. It's a living organism with its own rules, and to be accepted, you have to show it respect. Once I learned that main lesson, I started to understand other things too. For example, food. In America, good service at a restaurant is fast service. The waiter checks on you every 5 minutes. In Paris, a good waiter leaves you alone for 2 hours. Dinner isn't just a meal, it's a ritual, a conversation, a performance. At first, I was annoyed that they wouldn't bring me the check. Then I realized they weren't kicking me out. They were giving me the gift of time. It was another cultural shift in my mind. From that moment on, my journey changed. I stopped chasing landmarks and just started living. I spent hours sitting in a cafe in the Marais district, just people watching. I got lost in the Latin Quarter and found the most amazing bookstore. I had a picnic not at the Eiffel Tower, but on the banks of the Canal Saint-Martin, alongside local young people. I tried cheeses whose names I couldn't pronounce. I drank wine that cost €3 a bottle and was delicious. I realized that the real magic of Paris isn't in the postcard views, but in these small moments. The crunch of a fresh baguette, the glow of streetlights on wet pavement, the sound of an accordion drifting from a park. I left France a completely different person. My Instagram dream of Paris had died, but in its place, a real, deep love for the city was born. For its flaws, its beauty, its complex people, and its incredible atmosphere of freedom. So, if you're dreaming of Paris, you should go. But leave your expectations at home. Don't try to find the city from the movies there. Let the real Paris, noisy, chaotic, imperfect, but absolutely magical, find you instead.